Thank you, Alex.
And it just connected, so we are good. Yep.
Great. Welcome, members of the public. Oh,
You gotta talk to me first.
sorry. Good. We good?
Recording in progress.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you, Mr. LaConte. Welcome, members of the public. We concluded our executive session and now in the public session portion of our meeting. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We shall proceed to the first hearing of citizens. Mr. LaConte, could you kindly provide guidance?
Members of the public are now welcome to come up to the microphone to address the Township Committee. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are not topics scheduled for public hearings tonight. Those present may step up to the microphone to be heard. If you are watching via Zoom, you may speak during any of the public comment sessions by following the Zoom instructions to raise your hand. Whether in person or online, when you are recognized to speak, please mind the following procedures. Please say your name, spell your last name, and give the name of your street. You do not need to give your street number. All public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Rather than using any of your time answering questions, the Township Committee will wait until you finish speaking before responding. There are 2 public comment sessions on tonight's agenda. Each member of the public will be limited to 1 comment of up to 3 minutes during each public comment period. Written comments submitted to the Township Clerk before 3 p.m. today will be read during the public comment sessions. Written comments are subject to the same guidelines as oral comments. Duplicative written comments may be summarized rather than read in full according to guidelines issued by the New Jersey Division of Local Government Services.
Thanks, Mr. LaConte. Do we have any written statements or anyone online?
No hands raised online.
Thank you, Mr. LaConte. I now invite members of the public, should they desire to, come before the mic and make a statement. I see no one coming before the mic. I shall now close the first hearing of citizens. We'll move on to reports. Mr. Shahadi.
Thank you, Mayor. I would recommend, Mayor, if okay with you, that we start off with our engineer, since he is here and on the clock.
Agreed.
Is that okay?
Yes, welcome, Mr. Rushke.
That's on that clock, always gets you.
Yes, I'm always mindful of the clock.
Never mind.
And thank you, John. Just be careful your phone's on. Accidental dial. All right. So John did provide his report, and there are a few items that we would like to discuss. Are there any questions for his report, though, first? The general or the monthly report before we get into the WPC and the road, and we're also going to talk briefly about the pool.
Because it's so old, this is just for my own clarification, on the Safe Routes grants and where we are in the 2014, the Lafayette Spring Street, where does that actually run?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, those been going on for a long time. And,
Yeah.
And basically the Lafayette Spring Street project 2014, that's from the where the trail comes out by the first aid squad. It's going to be a path and a sidewalk
Yes.
that would continue to Lafayette.
Okay.
So it make that interconnection. And then the near the school up by Pine,
Yes.
from Pine to Shunpike, that section on the east side of the road. We have
So
sidewalks
another
on the-
sidewalk on the opposite side?
Correct.
Okay, that's where my
Correct.
question comes.
Correct.
Is there neighbor support for that?
There's mixed support for that. There was 1 or 2 neighbors that we had multiple public hearings on this application when we were going through the process, and in fact, some of those objectors have moved. so it's and some of the concerns that they had with trees, some of the trees actually have been removed from storm damage. So it's kind of the concerns that were raised were somewhat have diminished over the years. And where we stand with these, it's been a nightmare, frankly, regarding
Yes.
these Safe Route to School projects. The 2014, I believe we bid it 4 times, and every time we've bid it, the contractors have incorrectly submitted some of the federal forms that are required. And if they don't complete those forms correctly, we cannot award it. And so we have the last round, we received it on January 9th, we received the bids. DOT has yet to provide comments if the bids are acceptable or not. And I just emailed them recently with Z, so we're gonna try and give a little push on that, because it is unexcusable how long it takes for them to review bids. You know, they're simple forms that you should be able to review and determine, has he filled them out correctly or not? So hopefully we're gonna get an answer on that. And then with the timing of such, it may work out well that the project will hopefully happen this year during the summertime when school's out.
Okay.
So, the other two, the 2016 grant, we had these are grants for both design and for construction, and the design portion was done through a consultant that was retained by the DOT, and they completed the design, and the DOT had questions on the consultant's work, and that dragged on for a while to resolve that. And it's back with the DOT. You know, the revisions of plans have been changed, and they're with the DOT to review those final set of drawings for 2016. And so that's where we stand. So hopefully, and that shunt pike, as it says in the report, you know, one's basically on the north side, the south side of Shunt Pike. And the 2018, unfortunately, their position is that they're not going to continue, push that project along until the 2016 is completed and out the bid. Not done, but at least completed and ready to go out to bid.
When you say they, you're referring to?
DOT.
Thank you.
DOT.
Okay, thank you.
So I wish I had more positive things to report, but I've been reporting that for the last 10 years, it seems.
Well, that's good, yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Any other questions on his report?
Yeah, on that same subject, Mr. Rushkey, so on the website, there was a video presentation which covers some, if not all, of this work. But there is no, I don't believe there are any references to actual designs or schematics or visual representations of what the project is.
Okay.
So for the benefit of members of the public, is that something that might be, you know, selective documents or selective schematics that might be available and published on the website for the public to review? Or at least have an appreciation
I'll
for
make sure.
what's being considered?
Yeah.
They may have been there already, but in the migration, the files are still
okay.
putting files where they belong. So I think
Yeah.
they were up there on
I
the
thought
last
they were
website,
too, but we'll
so-
make sure
yeah.
that the most current ones are there and just
Yeah.
follow up with that.
Yeah, what I saw was just a video presentation, which was good.
Yeah, we had folders for each project, and there were supposed to be files in there for that, so I'll confirm.
Great, thank you. That would be appreciated.
Okay, anything else on the report? John, was there anything you wanted to highlight from that report? Or that's it?
No, I just mentioned the tax maps that we had,
Nothing else?
it's just that the tax maps, we went back to, you know, we've been going through multiple revisions with the state, and the state actually came back, you know, they've actually, it was more than just updating the tax map, it was a reconstruction of the tax map. We actually added multiple sheets, and so they kind of went back from day one of reconstructing the tax map. So I do unfortunately have to ask for a budget amendment on the tax maps, because the work just ended up being far more significant than what was anticipated. So I'm just working, you know, we have a final version that went to the state, we believe. We've addressed all their comments to date. We wanted to get assurance that when I come for a budget amendment, that it's a final amendment and that they'll have to bring it up again. So it may be something that next month, or hopefully we just get a letter out to you regarding that.
All right, so then moving on, we'll start off with I guess we'll do some of the easier stuff. The 2025 road resurfacing program. Let's start with that one. This is just giving you, as the the governing body and to start the dialogue in the public on the roads that we're looking at for the 2025 road improvement program. Kind of give you an overview of the process again for those that are new as well and those that may not recall. This is part of the planning process for the capital, right? This is the road work that John assesses with Rich. We have a matrix of all the roads that they evaluate every year, and they look at the top ones that are really bad, trying to fit in based off of linear length of the roads and how bad they are, how much works within a reasonable budget. We are planning again this year $500,000 in road work. And then after we adopt the budget, then we adopt capital, and then we will do a resolution to award a contract, most likely to the county co-op contract winner to do that work. So this right now is just to give you a sneak peek and see if you have any feedback on the roads before John moves ahead with starting to come up with final documents for them. So you have before you his roads for 2025 and along with cost estimates and some additional technical details. As I mentioned, it's been reviewed by John and Rich from DPW, and they are, we all concur that these are the roads, but if you have any opinions or request us to reconsider something, we welcome that.
So I can just expand on that, and
Let's see, do you have any questions or concerns, or?
On the roads?
Yeah?
I have a comment, but I'll let you go first. So your hand go up.
Oh,
Mayor.
yes, thank you. So I just want to make sure I follow the numbers correctly. So the contribution, so 160,000 listed for Hillside, that would be the contribution from the townships outside of the
correct, the grant.
funds, right?
Correct,
Right. And then 319 for River Road. Or well, actually, is that part of?
That's not part of
Okay,
it.
that's where I'm getting at. So
Yeah.
then, if 319 is out, then we're looking at about 448 in terms of.
Correct,
Right, capital
correct.
for the township, okay. So 404, okay, wonderful, I understand.
Okay, so I missed that because I saw something like where's the difference? I'm missing the difference. I saw 288. I finally got that document, sorry.
Paragraph C, there's 288. So those are town roads that John's recommending. Those are 5 roads totaling 288. But in addition, there is the 160 to cover the balance of the grant for Hillside Avenue. So we got a grant from
Okay.
DOT, but we have to pay a portion of that.
Okay.
So that's where you get the 288 and the 160.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah, because Hillside, we do have some additional drainage work that we're doing, and that's why that cost is a little higher. It's a little higher than usual just because we're doing that drainage work.
And how does that compare to last year? Are we spending?
In terms of the total amount expended, or what we're
Yeah.
planning to spend, it's about the same, right, John?
Yeah, it's about the
we-
same.
You know, we target 500, we come in a little under, and the balance of it tends to be, whether it might be potholes, curbing, you know, things come up during the year, that, you know, maybe a replacement of whatever, manhole, resetting certain things, because it's all part of that road work that we're setting aside, that road work capital improvement project, that's where we tap in from those extra funds.
Okay.
Yeah, when we add in the DOT and the amount of square footage that we're paving, it's from a 10,000 foot level. That's a reasonable amount to be sustainable of making sure that we're keeping up with the roads. We're not letting them deteriorate to a point where we're reconstructing them. It's a reasonable amount that we're allocating each year.
And John does a great job with estimating them, but they are still also estimates, so
Yes.
you never know what happens. We'd rather be slightly under, have, you know, 500 budgeted, and that way we're not, you know, in the middle of a project trying to figure out where we're gonna take money from
Yeah,
to
so-
make ends meet.
one
Like
of the
this
very-
year, we had actually a reduction. I think you guys
Yeah.
approved a change order last meeting. That was the change order that we did, right, John?
Correct,
Was it last
correct,
meeting or
yeah.
the meeting before, there was only a couple $1,000 reduction, but
Mm-hmm.
you never know what happens.
Yeah, because these are unit price contracts, so we do an estimate on approximate square footage of the road so we can calculate it, but one of the big variables that we're obligated to pay under the New Jersey Public Contract Law is an asphalt adjustment and a fuel adjustment. And some years it's a break even, so other years, you know, there's been years where there's been substantial deficit where we had to really pay a lot more for that cost. So There was at least 1 year going back where there was questionable if we should even go forward with it because the fuel charge was so significant. But we watch that and we'll bring it to your attention if something like that happens again, but.
Okay,
And our goal is to have a contract awarded so that we can have the work done before school starts.
Yeah.
That's our goal, but it all depends on the budget process and where we fit in line in the queue. We try to, like last year, we tried to be very quick to get first in queue with the contractor because that contractor's doing towns all over the county and.
Yeah, this year, the contract was won by Tilcon, which is large enough to do, multiple contracts. The contractor that had it last year, it was Riverside Paving, who was just a smaller contractor, and he in fact didn't get to all the towns that, put in for requests for pavement. So we were actually frankly lucky. I have several towns that I know.
Well, we made a call.
Yeah, well, we made a call, yeah.
We made a call to him.
Yeah, we did.
I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. So it's just the roads reviewed, the final recommendations, right? The 60 through whatever, 64 from Delwood down to Joanna. That's what we're discussing.
There should be a memo also.
It's
That was
a-
his calculations, but then there was a memo included. So it would be these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these roads, and then that one.
so for the benefit of residents, because I don't know if they would have seen
Yeah.
this, we're talking about Delwood, Old Farm Road, Ferndale, Wexford, and Overlook.
As well as
As well
Hillside.
as-
Hillside. Okay. I was just
Hillside's
curious.
under
It
the-
doesn't
yes,
look
okay.
that way. I was just curious if with the detours in place right now, will that create, any of those roads create further aggravation of drivers, even for a limited period of time? But it doesn't look that way based on.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
roads that
It
you're
shouldn't.
saying.
And most of these roads, they're milled and paved within a day they're milled and then a day they're paved, so it goes quickly. So yeah, section D is just roads that it just kind of gives the committee an idea of where roads that are likely gonna be on next year's list.
And then the only other question slash comment I have is we keep deprioritizing Britton Road.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that one up.
Because we keep waiting for the Rolling Knolls, some kind of resolution, the EPA to come back, and that's just been dragging, so.
Yeah.
And who knows where that goes in the current political environment, so, but I don't know that people complain, but it's a mess, that road's a mess.
Yeah, and the DPW does keep up with the potholes and do what they can to patch it. They do a
Okay.
reasonable job patching it and keeping it, just safe. But it's, but like you said, people have not been complaining. Not that, we should be waiting for people to complain to pave a road, but, it is a concern that, we really, that could be another 20 years before that super fund happens, so maybe it is something that we
A stake in the ground.
yeah,
Yeah.
just
For
kind of
definitive
bite the bullet and just do that one and just.
Or is
Fair
there
point.
a cheaper way, aside from between patching and repaving, is there some?
Not from Brittany, it really needs a structural repair. We could do like micro paving and stuff, and all that does is seal the road and makes it and prolongs it, but it's not gonna, Brittany's at the point where, and the amount of cracking in the road, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be worthwhile doing it. We're not gonna get any substantial benefit by doing it. We would do it and then we would, the results within a year or two, we'll see it start cracking again. So it really does need a mill and pave.
Yeah, and the worry, if we paved it, is that trucks would be going through to.
Yeah, the
remove
road's gonna,
debris,
the road's
which is
gonna be
not even-
destroyed once the trucks
Yeah.
start coming in, because they have hundreds of tandem trucks are gonna be running through it, and so they're gonna ultimately do that. And will the EPA fix the road? Possibly, as part of that negotiation that we have with them, that, they damaged the road, but.
Yeah, I mean, best case, if EPA came back again, minimum 2 year, I can imagine a
We're
truck
not
would
gonna
come.
get the letter probably before the end of the year. I talked to our attorney on that today, actually, so we're probably looking at like anything actually happening,
A few years out,
Yeah.
yeah. So do we wanna put that, I mean, I don't even know where we put it, but relative to River Road, we have it's a, grant, not River Road, sorry. Hillside has submitted that grant, it was awarded.
It's awarded.
So it would
Hillside
have
is
to make up
awarded.
for, because of its budget, 112, we'd have to take out about that much of roads from the budget. So let's say it's, either take out 3 roads or 2 roads, it seems like, is the
Mhm.
easiest way to do it. I
That's
feel
what
like
we
you could
wanted.
take out 4 and 5 and replace it with that. It's not an exact amount, but it's 8,000 off. We've got that cushion if you wanna do something like that. John, do you have thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, well, you're right. It's, otherwise, we just have to increase the amount we wanna do this year. It's.
We can't increase the amount.
You can't.
Because I'm presenting the budget to John, and we cannot increase
I
the
knew that
amount.
answer was coming.
So that's that.
Fair enough, fair enough.
It is taken out,
Yeah.
it's taken out 2 roads.
Yeah. And, you know, Britain Road, a lot of times when you have a road of this size, sometimes a lot of municipalities will break it into 2 phases. You know, do 1 phase this year, another phase next year, so we could, you know, possibly think of that.
But then again, we're taking out 2 roads at that
Yeah,
point.
well, if you divide it in half, and maybe you're just taking out Overlook and just,
Yeah.
doing that.
That's true.
Although it just may raise more questions and concerns why
Yeah,
we would pick
yeah,
the rest of
doing
the
half
road.
Yeah, I would suggest if we commit to it, do the full lot, yeah, one less scene, especially going right across. Yeah, so, consideration of, substituting it for the equivalent dollar amount, or putting a stake in and committing to adding it, next cycle
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
would be the 2 considerations.
You don't have to make a decision now, but, we've got time, but it,
Yeah.
right, I mean,
Yeah.
we've got time on that, but
We have time
we
on
don't
that.
wanna forget about that, and,
Okay.
And I could also talk to Rich and see if he can just maintain it 1 more year, just to, and then we just kick the can 1 more year if he can make that work. We'll take a close look at it.
I mean, if is there?
Would be the best way to, and so.
Say, is there consensus
warrant
now, is
a
there?
little bit for additional discussion, and then maybe circle back with Mr. Rushkey, or
I'm sorry,
does it warrant having a bit of more of discussion on the subject matter, and then circling back with Mr. Rushkey?
yeah, I mean, things like these, if there's no factual if there's nothing
Yeah.
more data you need, then what are you punting
Right,
it for, other than
yeah.
to maybe sleep on it, or if you wanna consult with anybody, but, I mean, how does it, as it stands now, how's it look? What is is there a feeling one way or the other, if people, the 5 of you don't have a feeling one way or the other, or do you have a preference? If you've got the preference, then we can make a decision tonight.
I mean, I'm not familiar enough with the conditions in all of these roads,
Yeah.
so I think I need to look it over personally to make.
So maybe you wanna drive around and then we can revisit this in April? Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
if we're not in a rush, that would be
yeah,
good.
okay.
Excellent. I will say as a final note, Mr. Rushkey and Z, during my time here, the planning process for this has gone quite well from what I've observed. It's been disciplined, we've stayed very tight to the number, if not underneath, which I'd love to see, as far as planning and budgeting. So hats off
Thank you.
to the controls and processes here.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John. So that's that for roads. We'll revisit that in a workshop in April. This one's a big one. Actually, before we get to that one, let's do pool real quick. So, we do have a little bit of time on that. Recap, John and I were talking and trying to recap as far as whether there was a consensus as to what to do with the pool walls.
Right.
And, you know, we've heard from the members at the last meeting. I think what, John, I don't wanna speak for you, but I think what we agreed upon is that we just make an in-kind replacement, leave things as is, unless there's any further modifications to the walls that are requested.
Would the
I don't
stairs
think
be
we
included
left
in
there.
those?
Yeah, there were a lot of things.
That's
that
the
people
one
wanted.
that's
The
the road.
stairs, so, cause I think there's only 1 set of stairs on the snack shack side. And so people wanted at least another set of stairs.
On the snack shack side?
On the snack shack side,
Well,
yeah.
there's one there already.
There's one there already.
Yeah,
on the
we're,
D-bed.
the thought was in kind. We'll just do it similar. We'll keep the same amount of steps. We'll keep all the side slopes. We'll do everything. It's just the one side by where we have the laps at the very end of that wall. It's very steep. I'll just, settle that out so that all the side slopes are uniform and just kind of keep it the general configuration that it's in now.
Okay, because I thought we also had a safety issue, again, on the snack shack side, where in the deep end, you know, where there's been some concerns that kids can't be seen. Now, I know there was a little one who kind of was sinking there, and some adults saw them, but the message that I heard was there was not good visibility, so there was some discussion about whether or not to straighten that out somehow, so that, at least in that little section by the diving boards.
Okay.
And then the other area we were talking about that I thought the members were on board was the vertical wall over on the Lapland side.
Right, a lot of that.
But where we left off was, I mean, we got.
I mean, that was the feedback, but I didn't know that there was a consensus on those. That's why, you know, we wanna come back and ask, is there a consensus from you as to what you want us to do on this?
Would the, going from slope, on the swim lane side, going from the slope to the straight, would that be a significant cost differential?
Probably less expensive to do, you know, vertical walls versus the slopes.
Yeah.
The slope's gonna become more difficult to pour and
Right.
effort.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So, is there a consensus on?
Why don't we recirculate that last set of drawings, because everybody's trying to stir up their memory and.
Okay.
Yes.
And
That
there
last
is
set
a
of
version of the
drawings
drawings
is-
on the website, so if we can put that up.
We did have them on the website.
There is a drawing, I
Yeah,
don't know
that
if
was
it
the-
reflects, yeah.
I'll
I frankly don't recall.
Yeah,
it.
there was a set of drawings, because we did put that on the website.
Yes.
Um,
But in any event, let's put a singular version that we're all going to critically consider, yeah, and put that on the website, whether that's the current version on the website or a different version.
What's our decision timeline on this? To do the project, obviously, the fall.
We'd like to
6/25.
authorize the bid, well, we'd like to award the bid no later than July, August.
Okay,
So if you go back from there, let's say a month,
Yeah.
add that, and John
Yeah,
chime in,
maybe
a month of being public, right?
Yes.
So now, let's say July to give us ourselves a cushion, back to June.
Right.
So then May authorization to bid, right?
Yeah, well, the sooner we go out to bid, the better, because
Yes.
what happens if we have to rebid because of a problem? And then sometimes it takes a contractor time to get the contractor signed, get all the bonds in place, the insurance, and that takes time. So sooner the better. And
Yeah.
generally,
Yeah, that's what
I would love to
I'm-
go out to bid in April if we could.
Yeah.
yeah. Which is
But we
around
also
the corner.
said, originally we said we were gonna survey the broader community, so at a minimum, we wanna post this and get input from the
But
community.
the survey was gonna be not on the drawing, on the broader community, because they don't, at least what I had envisioned was the survey was more on planning from the pool perspective overall, right? Like, it's why if we're asking everybody in town that people don't go there, they don't know what the pool's like,
Mhm.
what their input's not gonna be, they may not weigh in. We have the email addresses of those members, but for the broader community, it was more of for long-term capital planning for the pool. You know, what sort of improvements do we wanna make at the pool? What are priorities for the pool? What would attract more members
Yeah.
to the pool?
I certainly left off that was gonna go hand in hand with this, cause it would seem if you're gonna have capital plan to improve the pool facilities, that would go hand in hand with this survey. That's where I kinda left off last.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
that's, again, I mean, I emailed you on that,
Mhm.
we can chat later about it. That's not what the intent of what I had envisioned when I said survey, because I was the one that chimed in and said, we're gonna do a community survey. It was more of capital planning, and you guys saw that, the two of you saw it, it was more of, you know, broad strokes, what are priorities for the township,
Mhm.
rather than specific plans for the pool, because again, if these families aren't members, they're not going to the pool, they're either not gonna care about it, they're not gonna weigh in, or it doesn't affect them, they don't know. It's more of how do we get those people that are not members
Mhm.
to consider joining?
Okay,
And so, I mean, we could pivot on it, but,
you know, again,
there's-
as long as if this group comes up with a consensus and then we're posting that and giving the public time to
Yeah.
give their input, then that's fine.
Okay, so John, we will recirculate the last set of plans, do you remember what they were? It was,
I thought they were just having it was
Straight
it was
wall on the
upgraded,
side.
to just show the vertical wall by the swimming lanes. and then going back to that side walls, side slopes. And so it was, I
Right.
thought we did update it based on our last
Right.
discussion,
Oh.
so I'll check that.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Okay, now the beast, the WPC memo. So this is, to set the stage, this is the product of John's work, or John and his team's work, on the contract we authorized for them to do, which was to prepare preliminary design and cost estimates for planning for the next phase, which would be to go to the I-Bank. And so John conducted his report, there's the memo. John?
Yeah, so, just as history, the plant was constructed in the 1960s, and in about 1990s, there was a major upgrade of the plant for two reasons. One, there was changes in regulations, and then the plant was also increased in capacity to accommodate the Prudential Center that is now Geralda Farms. You know, so Prudential actually paid for that, some of that improvements in 1990 to have that done. So there was some major improvements in the 90s, and we haven't had any major improvements. You know, we've been upkeeping various components, but we never had any really major renovations to the plant until, you know, what we're proposing now. We're looking at 3 different components in the plant. The headworks. The headworks is basically everything flows to the plant by gravity, and then at the headworks is basically a pump station that pumps it up to a gradient in the highest treatment part in the plant, which then it flows through gravity through the plant. So it's just I'm going to lift the water up to a high point again so that it flows gravity through the plant to treat it. It's the basically we have pumps in there, we have a comminutor that grinds it up, and so we don't have any other treatment at that point at the headworks. And so, which is uncommon. It really is an older design, you know, the way it was done. And one thing with the headworks is that it's you know, frankly, it's 60 years old. We certainly got its service life out of, you know, we had this component, but it also is it's a confined space. It's very difficult to operate the equipment. You actually have to stand on a small elevator that brings you down into the lower level in order to work on it. So it is something that it's at its useful life. It's not a very you know, employee-friendly sense from a safety aspect when you're working on these pumps in such a confined space. So with this, we were proposing to have a more modern design of a headwork system, which also incorporates removing rags and other solids out of the system before it gets passed on into the treatment process. Because right now, rags and other components, all they are is grinded up and then pumped into the treatment, and then we're adding that sludge, and those larger rags and such, it's just havoc to the pumps. And so, you know, we can remove that and remove those solids. The treatment system will work better in the sense that, you know, less mechanical, you know, potential for mechanical problems and other issues. So it's an expansion of the pump system where no longer there'll be an elevator that you have to go down to service the pumps and service the comminutors, but it would be a large concrete structure where you would go into a stairwell and you can walk down safely and work on the equipment and come back up. So it's a larger component. So it's and like I said, right now it's basically a tin can in the ground. It's just a matter of time before the steel is starting to show some corrosion. So it's at its useful life. It is something that we have to replace. Another component that we're looking at is, and again, this has not been touched since the 1960s, is the headworks. What also hasn't been touched since the 1960s is the primary clarifier, and that's the first treatment component in the treatment chain, and that also has not been, and no major modification to that over the years. And if you go up and look at it, it looks like it's 60 years old. You know, even the rack itself is starting to tilt because it's rotted out, and it's just something that it just needs to be replaced at this point in time. So that's one of the components. And then the last this is actually towards the end of the treatment train of the various different treatment processes, that the post-aeration, we're aerating the treated effluent before it's discharged. That tank is also, it's an older tank. There's some minor modifications were done to it in the 90s, but nothing major. It's a concrete well. We're not looking at a complete replacement of that, but a lot of the equipment is the original equipment. The walls need to be repaired and things. So that's not a major, rip out and replace, but that's just a major overhaul of that facility. So we come up with an estimate of the cost, and the cost, we developed that working with the operator of the plant and looking at what's a practical way of addressing all of these. And so we came up with a cost, and ultimately, like Z said, it's a very substantial improvement at this point. The estimated cost is in the $6 million range, which includes all the financial costs, the legal costs, the engineering costs, the bonding and such, and we've added some contingencies also in that just to make sure. So the step would be is to go through the New Jersey I-Bank. New Jersey I-Bank is a very it's very lucrative in the sense that you get a very low interest rate for borrowing to do infrastructure. Basically, you're going out to bond for AAA, and you get a very good rate when they go out to bond. But then half of that is bonded, the other half is supplied by the federal government at a 0% loan. So you're taking a very good rate to going out for a bond sale plus 0, and you're adding it up. So it's usually about half of what you would get doing. So it's a very lucrative financing program. There is some bells and whistles with that program because that comes with the federal component, and typically you wouldn't utilize this program for a small project. For usually a lot of people say $500,000. If it's less than that, then with all the red tape that you go through to go close on the loan, it's not worth it. It's almost the benefits that you get from the low interest rate you're paying for all the other things that you have to do, planning documents and other things with the federal requirements. But above that, it is a very economical means of doing that. So there is basically a process that we have to go through, and so if we want to move forward with this project, the next step would be to actually prepare preliminary plans and specifications. We do have some permitting that's associated with it because the entire plant is located in the wetlands transition area, so there are some wetlands permits that need to be addressed. And then the loan process itself, the loan is it's like filling out a mortgage. You go through all these forms of paperwork. We do have to do a planning document, and there's a number of steps that you have to go through. We wouldn't anticipate this having a component of major cultural resources because sometimes you get pulled into with SHPO and you get pulled in with other components of the federal requirements. You have to do an archaeological study as part of it, but we didn't have to do that because we took a loan out when we did the effluent pump station when we abandoned the Chatham Glen plant. We took the same loan program, and so we didn't have to do any extensive. So we don't anticipate doing those extensive studies either because we just didn't have to do it the last time. So that's the general process.
First process is getting a scope of work and proposal to do all that work.
Correct. Correct.
So that way you can consider that
correct
contract, and then.
Yeah, that's because that's what's typically done is there's seed money just to get the preliminary design done. So if they're not bid ready drawings, plans and specs, but they're enough to start the loan process to show that it's enough to get into the loan process, and it's a substantial amount of work. You get that, but it gets you into the loan process, and then once you're in the loan process, then there's funds you can pull out of the loan to finalize the design and finalize everything associated with it, and pay for the planning documents and such.
John, in the looking at the risks of time from what you've looked at, is there anything that says we have to move sooner rather than later? Is any danger of any kind of imminent failure?
That's hard to predict, but I don't want you to
I'm
prove me
holding
wrong
you to
on
it.
that. We've tried to bring things to the committee before the intimate failure is going to happen. this is not something that I would recommend kicking the can to another year or two.
Okay,
We're at
it's
a
this
point.
year's.
It's this year is where we really should be doing this, because we've been talking about this for at least 2 years, 3 years, and so it is time. And I don't think we've waited too long, but I would not, you know.
And there's time just to even get us to that.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
IBank
That's my
application, yeah, exactly.
point, bringing it back.
Yeah, the IBank application is cumbersome, will
Mhm.
take time.
You know, by time
designs.
funding is set for the
Right.
preliminary design and we do that and we get through the loan, it's gonna be a 2026 construction.
Yeah,
But,
okay.
but we've, but yeah, I don't think it's something that we need to expedite. You know, we can still take the normal course, which we're recommending, is to adopt the budgets and go through the process.
Thank you.
And what's the, I guess, life expectancy, I guess, of, like, say we did up everything and, you know, gave the okay, like, how long can you fairly breathe easy for before you feel like you're gonna have to approach?
It's going to, well, you're going to, the concrete you know, this will last, 60, 70, you know, the actual concrete that we pour, you know, that's gonna be, you know, some pumps can only last maybe 20 years, so, you know, we'd be
Right.
replacing pumps and, you know, we've even replaced pumps in the headworks and things, but but replacing pumps is maintenance, you know,
Yeah.
that's up. So we wouldn't be looking at, you know, these three components, once we do this work, there wouldn't be any major renovations within our lifetime. It's many years.
Okay. And what's the loan process of that is, how long of a term of a loan is?
It's 20 years.
Okay.
It's 20 years.
So originally, when you were doing rough kind of draft of what needed to get done, the number was 10 million. Is this the prioritized, or is it just, we have a tighter estimate?
Well, we have a tighter estimate, and you know, we kind of reeled in. Frankly, we reeled in the operator of what he wants. His wants and needs, what he wants versus what he needs, and so we kind of reeled that in, and so that was kind of this exercise. Is that I do have preliminary sketches and such of what is proposed, so we're able to sit down with him and just go over exactly what is necessary and you know, come up with what's reasonable. So that's why we cut back. It was, you know, it was looking at the high end versus the worst case scenario versus, okay, now we're looking at, and the 6 million I think if 6 million is a reasonable number. That 6 million, you know, will it go down to 5? We're certainly going to try to make it go down to 5. You know, we're going to look at value engineering as we go through the process and where we can save costs and try to reduce that further. And ultimately, when you may bond for 6 million, but ultimately you close on the final amount, and so that final amount may actually be less. So you'll end up closing on whatever the final costs are on the project.
Okay.
Is
And-
there anything else in that's left out of this that you really wish you could do? I mean, I guess to your point, you reeled them in a little bit, so. I mean,
This, you know, this is, I think this is
I'm not looking for more money, but.
We didn't slash a lot out of
Yeah.
this. It's, you know, we've balanced, you know, what the practical needs are, and so, you know, there could have been additional, you know, things that could have been added to this, but there was really no value to it. You know, one of the things that initially we're talking about is removing, having not just the rags, but also look at, you know, pulling out sediment and you know, anything that stones and things that is common on some of the larger plants, but we really don't see that amount of accumulation occurring in the plant. And in fact, we have that going into the primary clarifier, and periodically we pump out the primary clarifier where they're being collected right now, and it's not a substantial amount. So to invest that money to take it out of the headworks where it's not being an issue, it just, you know, those types of things that, you know, we could have had it, but it was something that we really didn't need. So those are the things that we started to look at is what is there truly a need, and you know, and so.
Yeah, I just want to ask from a financial perspective, you know, given we're talking about half no interest rate funding, and then the other half low, which I assume is low relative to normal municipal bond funding. So, not that we want to bypass cheap funds, but WPC is in good financial shape, and and I think they're sitting on a bit of funds. So, but we're still looking to access debt for the entirety of the 6 million, or is it 20?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Because this is not the only capital project, this is the capital project that John's working on with respect to larger things that would really merit I-bank work. There's still other things, I mean, you'll see, for example, today, we're looking to replace some pumps and motors over there
And we have some generators
yeah,
to
so-
replace on the pump station, so there's other work in the system.
Right,
You know,
and there are other things that come up, so, you know, we don't, and, you know, yes, there's some money in there, but nowhere near, it's in good shape, it's not in
Yeah.
great shape financially. you
But
know.
we don't expect we're gonna have to raise sewer fees.
We need to do a rate study, especially when you undertake a project of this magnitude, you really should undertake a rate study. I don't know when the last time, in fact, I can tell you just from knowing that the ordinance is written on our books where we still have, you know, essentially like 2 districts. We still have 2 taxing districts, granted, they're still the same, the rate is the same, but we have 2 taxing districts. So we really need to do some cleanup on that. When we're taking on debt of this magnitude also, you wanna make sure that your rates are looking forward to being able to pay those as well as any other operating expenses. So while we're good now, probably when we finish this or before, or concurrent, I think we should really look at doing a rate study, and that would realign the rates.
That begs the question, what entails a rate study?
I mean, a rate study will look at a lot of things, not just, infrastructure and future improvements, current improvements, debt, payment history.
Well, I mean, in terms of money and time.
Yeah,
Money and
you're
time.
just diving into all the
Everything
numbers,
having to
yeah,
do with it.
yeah.
Like whether it's, more like looking at it as a business operation. And because it's a utility and it's supposed to be self-sustaining now and for the future, you wanna make sure that the rates that you've got ensure that it will continue to be a self-sustaining, self-liquidating operation.
Yeah, well, I mean, given, I don't think those rates have moved. I don't think the entire time I've lived here.
Yeah, it's definitely in a long time, and that's the big sign that you really are due for a rate study.
But I also know financially we were in great shape, so I mean.
But that, again, that, now you're depleting that great, you know, we've been depleting that slowly over the years. I don't know how it used to look 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I know, again, it looks good now, it's healthy, we're not in bad shape, but we're gonna be taking on $6 million in infrastructure improvements there. We wanna make sure we stay in good shape and don't fall behind later on where it is a problem. And then you're looking at, wow, massive rate spikes. It's good to have incremental, and that's what, unfortunately, a lot of towns are like, well, no, we don't wanna raise, we don't wanna raise, we don't wanna raise. And you're looking at, wow, you're going from, you know, $1 to $2, whereas it should have been every couple of years we were raising it a quarter. And so that's, I think, something that would be appropriate here.
Is it advisable to head down this capital commitment path without doing the rate study? I mean, we should have.
I think you're gonna account for it in the
some
rate
idea.
study either way. It's not like, they're really doing a deep dive. They're looking at all the, you know, everything that's associated with that. And the fact that we have this is helpful as well. It's, you know, it's not like there would be that much gleaned out of waiting versus, you know, until waiting for it to be done. Is that what you're suggesting, you know, wait?
Well, I would imagine the public would be keen on understanding, well, gee, is the potential rate change going to be de minimis, or is it going to be much more substantial?
But the work needs to be done.
I understand.
Yeah, well, you could do a simple
Yeah.
amortization
Yeah.
schedule, you know, over 20 years,
And it's
6 million,
IBAN stuff, so
and
it's
just,
not like
you know,
it's-
1% interest over the 20 years, and kind of, and then divide that by the number of homes, and that will kind of tell you what it might be, kind of, what this may be impacted would be.
Okay. And I also just want to be clear in making a distinction between, because it's a substantial investment, between statistical life versus realistic life. So you made multiple references that the equipment's old, and I just want to be, for the members of the public, the changes being made, the investments being made here is not necessarily because these things are old. It is.
Well,
It's not beyond statistical life. It's that we have potential critical points of failure. These things are held together with bubble gum scotch tape, and give me an understanding for,
Yeah.
well, gee, it's time to do it versus, because, accounting and actuarial studies
yeah.
tell you we should be doing it versus we are really, nobody wants a, mission critical failure
Yeah.
in your sewage system.
So the headworks, I'm sure at that time, the manufacturer probably said the warranty on that steel structure that you're putting into the ground was probably 30 years, and so we got 60 years out of it. So, we've, and then the headwork, the.
John, just explain, what is a headworks, so the public understands? Because
Yeah.
you say headworks, and
Yeah.
I think it's helpful to understand, because it's a very critical component.
Yeah, like I said, the entire sanitary sewer system that we have is all gravity. Everything flows downhill, and it's all, the pipes are such that, and in order to get at gravity, once the effluent coming from, once the sewage gets to the plant, it's at a very deep elevation because it's all running gravity. We're taking an interceptor sewer that's at the plant that goes all the way up to Hickory Square Mall. It's that long, so it's a very long pipe that we have with these interceptors. And by the time you get to the plant, the piping is 20 feet deep plus, in that range, so it's very deep. So basically, you're pulling it out, you're pulling from that sewage that's coming into that last manhole, you're putting that into the headworks, which essentially is a pump station. And essentially that pump station is now pumping it up to the primary clarifier, and then from the primary clarifier is up on the top, it's the highest point in the plant. And then from there, it all runs through gravity. It runs through the oxidation tanks, it runs through the primary filters, it runs through the filters, it runs through all the, so it's gravity. So
John, if the headworks fails,
headwork fails.
what is a likely failure point at the headworks given its age?
If the headworks fails, sewage is just gonna flow into it'll overflow, frankly, probably back into some structures because it happens, and it'll just overflow in the manholes.
Environmental mess, inability to process, and backups in homes.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to get ahead of something like that.
Yeah, and we've had over recent years, that we've had some issues with valves and other things going wrong with this structure where we had to go and rent tanks for bypassing and stuff, and it's very expensive.
In my first year, we had a major electrical component failure.
Correct.
Remember,
Yep,
and
yep.
that was a generator and standby staff for, and those are custom, and a lot of the equipment there is custom, specific to, these types of, you don't just run out to, Home Depot and replace one of those parts. We were waiting for a while on parts there too, and that cost us quite a bit of money, not just on the parts, but also the staffing and the generators and the backup. Remember that, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, no, it was a
And
major
you probably
cost,
doubled
yeah.
a lot more,
Yeah,
so.
no, that's one of the reasons why we're saying that this component is starting to cost us money.
And it is one of the most critical component pieces of infrastructure that the township maintains.
Right.
John, in the plant, if, just where we are, the timing here from the standpoint of the headworks and the primary clarifier and in your memo, et cetera, are there other components that were 5 or 10 years away from doing the same thing? Are there others that are that major, that are coming down the pike that an expectation is, okay, yeah?
Yeah, the oxidation ditches, that's another major component. We just, that's one of the things that are in the concrete itself. We've been inspecting it. There's no major problems with it. We don't envision the oxidation ditches having any major problems with that. Same with our sludge tank. We don't see much, anything in the near future with that. Like with the oxidation, you do see the pumps. We had to replace the pumps and things like that. The primary clarifiers, they're probably next in line because those were modified in the 90s. Maybe we have another 10, 20 years before we're doing those, and so those are probably the next components that need to be changed out. By that time, the filters were probably maybe getting next. And then, like I said, the oxidation aeration basin, that's going to be done at this phase. We recently redid the UV disinfection trough, so that was recently done, so that's not a major component. So, there are other components, but it's not like we're going to come to you next year and say, oh, we got another problem. It's not going to be that sense. You know, this is just, you know, the last one was done 30 years ago, and this is due for these remaining components that were done.
Thank you.
So what are we authorizing or planning to authorize?
At this point, nothing, just it's a report on the work product that you commissioned, and an outline of next steps. John is working on the scope of work and proposal for me for the next step, which would be to prepare IBank documentation, design documentation, and to move forward with the process. Right?
Yep.
So would anything be forthcoming for the next?
Probably for the
meeting?
April workshop
Okay.
meeting, right, John?
Yeah,
We
yeah,
meet
that-
up
yeah,
for the
yeah,
April
yeah.
workshop meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rush.
I actually understood all that.
More than you care to know?
Things you learn when you're on the township committee.
I know I wanna go, that I can say.
You just wanted to go down the drain and away.
And if anyone wants a tour of the WPC,
I
it's
took
actually.
a tour.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
At least two, it's,
Yeah.
it's, going through a sewage processing facility, not the most attractive thing, but when you see really like what kind of an operation is running behind the scenes, people don't realize it's just down Tanglewood and how truly critical it is and why, you know, it keeps up our plant staff up at night, and they do a fantastic job.
They do,
They really do.
Very conscientious, all of them.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Good night.
Good night.
Sure, if you're doing the walkthrough, take it in, sure.
Yeah.
Mr. Shoddy, what would you like to cover
That's
next?
it for engineering, so we can go to the top, Mayor, if that's okay?
Wonderful.
All right, so starting at the top, administration, ordinances and resolutions. These are some items that we are planning for the next committee meeting, I'm sorry, the 25th. And if there are any delays, we'll go into the April meeting, kind of giving you a 30-60 outlook. First one is the Municipal Alliance grant application. This is an annual grant application. I don't know if there's any questions or concerns on that one. It's pretty routine. Okay, I'm just gonna keep going until you stop me. Copier lease, also somewhat administrative in function. However, because it is a long-term lease, 5 years, even though it's below our thresholds, you know, my interpretation of both the public contracts or anything above a 2-year agreement, the governing body has to approve. This is a copier over at the police department. They've been operating on a copier that's out of lease now, and really making it last as long as possible, but now it's getting to the point where it's having a lot more issues than it's worth. And next is we talked about this briefly in the executive. We're hoping to have a resolution to adopt the amended agreement for Vernon Grove. I'll skip over 4 for a moment. Another one, we're looking to have an ordinance to effectuate the sale of that outlier parcel that Ms. Cafoni's been working on over on River Road, adjacent to 482, 490 River Road. And then ratification of the appointments that I'll be making for the pool manager and the assistant managers. Pool manager, we have received, we've extended and received an acceptance of an offer for the new pool manager. I'll be meeting with him this Thursday. We'll be discussing the assistant managers, but you have their resumes. I'll be discussing them with him, talking to them, and then if all goes well, extending offers of employment to them later on. So, any questions on those items?
No, it's just really great.
Yeah.
Because, I think we had a real concern about trying to lock it in place by this time.
Yes.
you know,
It worked
years
out.
ago. It's just really terrific, so.
Yes, and thank you all for your support on that. And then, so I'll go back to fees update. There was a memo at the last workshop meeting that we reviewed, prepared by our land use manager, or our land board manager. There were some questions on that, and Ms. Cafoni and I also spoke with her, the secretary manager to the boards, and have a revised memo that makes it a little bit more clear what she was asking for. And these are the fees that she's looking to amend. She provided the current and the proposed, also had provided the fees in New Providence and at the borough for comparison. And the justification for this is because they haven't been increased in quite a while. The costs have gone up, everything from, you know, Postage, certainly you can imagine postage has gone up in 20 years, but also the costs for advertising and providing notice in the papers, as well as the staff and our overhead. So it's a nominal increase, really, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, and it's comparable to what the other towns are charging as well. It's hard to compare exactly apples to apples because of the language that some towns use and how they categorize their fees. It's not like UCC where everything is uniform. So this memo is much more clear, I think, than the last one. So hopefully helps you guys understand what we're looking for. Any questions?
Yeah, no, that was confusing, because I didn't understand that it was completely different from what we received the last time.
Yes.
Okay.
And I spoke with her about that, and Ms. Cafoni spoke with her about that, and we've got it cleared up.
Okay. Okay, because I was even confused as to whether we were talking about the recommendation that was made last time.
That original one, she was referencing notice of advertising. We do have a section in our ordinance related to advertising costs. So that was the understanding. Went back to then draft the ordinance, and then we realized the draft that Ms. Cafoni was working on was not actually the intention based off of the memo. And so now we have a memo to clarify what the actual intention was.
Okay, thank you.
Do we plan to have a draft ordinance for the next meeting?
So, thoughts on this?
I'm sorry, Mr. LeConte?
No,
My
we're
question is
trying
if we
to
plan
make
to-
thoughts on this, so we can draft the ordinance.
I have no further thoughts.
I guess one question I have is that you would like to add a 12 amended site plan. Currently, we don't charge anything, and we're going to 400, which I understand is market rate. But I guess, how often do we get amended site plan requests, or is this a common thing, or is this an unusual item?
I'll say this, I'm not familiar with Chatham Planning Board in particular, but planning boards in general, it's very common to get amended site plan, and I think typically the amended site plan, the process and the amount of work that your staff and it's the exact same as submitting a site plan. So,
As an original.
when I talked to Callie, that's exactly what she said, and I agree completely. So having a fee for that is, to me, completely justified and appropriate.
Yep.
So if they have to amend the site plan based on planning board feedback or zoning board feedback, we would still charge the fee?
Well, that's different. So if
Yeah,
you're
that has
before
to
the
be applicant.
planning board and you haven't gotten your approval yet, and you're still have an active application, and they say, oh, wait, do this, and they say, okay, well, let's adjourn till next meeting, and we'll make that change, and we come back before you, that's not amended site plan. That is, we got our approval, it's been 6 months, and you know what, I decided I didn't wanna actually build what you gave me the approval for, I wanna do something different, and so I wanna come back and change my site plan, I wanna get a different approval for a different project.
Sometimes there are field changes that are beyond the engineer's authority to approve on his own, and things need to go back to the board, which would part of why this would be necessary.
Yeah, or I went and got my approval, and then I built something different than what I got my approval for, and so now I have to come back and get approval for what I actually built.
Okay.
That's also would be an amended site plan.
A variety of field changes.
Okay.
Well, everyone needs to be re-noticed, right?
Well, it depends on if you needed notice to begin with, so some
Well,
site
in the
plan.
event, yeah, so in the event,
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you
additional
need
notice.
notice, and not all applications for site plan approval need notice, so only if you have variances would you need notice, need to provide notice. So that's, amended, but yes, if you have amended site plan and you would need notice, same thing. Mhm.
Any other questions or concerns, or can we move ahead with the draft?
no, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's it for administration. Moving on, the clerk submitted his report. Any questions on his report?
Yes, I have a question. So I saw that, you had talked about some training you did
For the online
SQL,
payments for pet
SQL?
licensing?
SQL, yeah, that we could do online pet licensing.
Yeah,
Do
so-
you know what time, do you have a timeline?
That should be sometime soon. Our administrator had a meeting with our construction official today where they discussed that, because it's sort of in tandem between me and construction, because they'll be going online for their payments as well.
Got it.
Now that we've gone through the training, we're waiting on SDL activating that now. Jack and I talked about wanting to have April 1st be our going live. Do you know, did you and Jack in your meeting
Yes.
come to a resolution when SDL is going to go live with the online payments?
Yep, we are hoping April first. I was mentioning that in my budget, and we'll be publishing something on the website about that as well.
Wonderful. That'll be a nice convenience for
Yeah.
residents. That's
Yeah, so,
great.
yeah, Jack and I felt like something clean like that, beginning of a month rather than the middle of a, and it's also the beginning of a new quarter. And then that way, once we know that for certain, then we'll start advertising that.
Okay. I'll hold off, but I do have questions on the construction side of that, so.
So that's it for clerk. All right, and now for construction.
Oh, I'll ask the question. So would residents be able to process any fees that are related with construction through SDL?
Almost all fees, construction fees, yeah.
Yeah.
What, is there any particular?
I'm just wondering if they have to come in at that point, because they sell scheduling's online?
Scheduling's online. I mean, right now, they still can't submit the permits online.
Okay.
That's something we're working on, and obviously requires state approvals and all, but we are moving in that direction. Besides submitting the permit paperwork, I don't think there's really much of a need for them to come in.
Okay, and then we're not bypassing, since they're coming in to submit their permit anyway, and they wanna give a check, we're
Yep.
not, but they're still allowed to do all that.
Oh, yeah, people are still allowed to do it, we'll accept all currency.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah, since the process for online payments is similar to what I'll deal with dog licensing, when people come into construction to submit their permit, the system will allow the construction department to have a button where if the person doesn't have cash or a check, the construction department will be able to send them a link through SDL to their email to basically invoicing them through the system. Then they could then pay online through a credit card.
Great, wonderful.
Welcome news. Thank you, Mr. Shahadi, Mr. LaConte.
Especially.
Making eGov a bigger reality is.
Definitely Mr.
what's
LaConte
wonderful.
and Mr. Daniels, they've been, and
Mr.
our
King.
CFO as
Yes.
well, Ms. King, and her team, they've been working hard on making this possible, so.
Yeah, thank you, I know it's been something we've been trying to put in place for a while, so I
Yes,
appreciate it.
yeah, it's just always a matter of juggling priorities. We start and then something else comes up. Okay, the next is, I'll kind of leave the finance till the end, since there's only one other thing left, I think, or actually two small things. Public Works, we've got a resolution we're looking for your consideration at the next meeting to replace some pumps and motors over at the plant. Those funds were allocated and budgeted for in the 2024 capital budget, so, now we're actually awarding a contract. Any questions on that? You did receive a resolution in your agenda packet, a resume, and that's for the serviceman at DPW that we're looking to appoint. And so we would have a resolution on the next meeting for that one as well. It's been a very difficult time and just process to get, this is almost going on nearly 2 years, trying to fill this vacancy. Well over a year and a half maybe. It's not just the problem that we're dealing with though, but it's a problem that towns all over are dealing with. The pay is not as lucrative as what they're able to get in the private sector, and the requirements of a CDL are, for some people, cumbersome, especially, I'll just say nowadays, you've got legal marijuana, which impacts your ability to get a CDL because it goes by federal standards, and some people don't want to make that commitment, and then also getting the training and going through the school and all that comes with it. So one thing we will be keeping in mind as we go into this year, one thing that I have to deal with is the Teamsters contract, renegotiating the DPW Teamsters contract. So, right now, our starting scale for step 14 is about $45,000. And trying to pull somebody with a CDL to come work in a job as intensive as DPW, pulling them from other places, we've had people asking for $70,000, $80,000 and refusing to come here for anything less than that. And, you know, that's not just a Chatham issue, just want to let you know though that that's the reality that we deal with our pay scale and trying to recruit talent to work at DPW.
I mean, this candidate looked like he had a very good background, so
Yes.
that looked great.
Yep.
Okay.
Any questions on the DPW report? No, okay. Any on the police report? I did skip over that one, sorry.
I believe no.
Tax collector report? All right, and finally, tax assessor, we got the report from the tax assessor, and we also have a resolution that concerns the tax appeal for a property that we've been dealing with tax appeal for several years. We did talk about that in executive at the last meeting. Any questions or concerns with moving forward with that? Okay, yes.
The tax assessor, so I had sent you a question, which we don't have to address that specifically,
yes.
but what you had sent, we saw examples of
The letters, yes. the letters
yes,
that
some of the
go out.
communications to residents. What do you recall, or do you know, it sounded like maybe June those would go out, I thought they would
No,
go out
I,
soon.
there's really, so let me back up. The tax maps, this kind of goes back to the tax maps. The tax maps have to be approved by the state in order for us to move forward with this process. Until that happens, we can't move forward. The other component that's holding it up is also the state approving the contract for the reval company that we awarded as well. They're not gonna, we're not gonna be able to move ahead until they do that as well. We don't know when either of those are gonna happen. They probably aren't gonna deal with the contract until the maps are done. So until they give us the stamp for the maps, then we'll wait for their approval on the contract, and then at that point, we'll evaluate, you know, public education and letters. We are still well within our timeline. You know, the original timeline that our assessor, Mr. Sherman, put together had us, you know, we're still within that time frame. We're good. So we will have plenty of opportunity to give notice to the public. We'll send out those letters. We will include in those letters a date at which the company and our assessor will come here also and either present to you at workshop and to the public, or we just do a separate standalone meeting for the public. But we'll consider those, but we'll include that in the letter. Look at the letter, the brochure. We'll have the videos and educate the public as much as possible. Being mindful of, we don't want to do much of any of that work during the summer months when a lot of people are away.
And then, so because the tax assessor, we've definitely had it in all the meeting minutes anytime he's presented. Is there, you have a separate page on the website, right, for the tax?
For the
this
reval, I
reval?
believe we do. Yeah.
And that should be, if you could check it's populated with all the, everything that we have, so in the meantime.
We did have the
we'll-
timeline on there. I'm remembering as
Okay,
we're
good.
talking about it, I do recall putting the whole entire timeline on there, the steps.
Okay.
And some information from the, Township, town ordered reval. Yeah, we do have that on there.
Okay.
There's a post
Great.
from February 1st of 2024, including all the steps and estimated timeline.
Great, thank you.
Okay. If there are none, then I'm gonna just quickly queue up the presentation for the budget, and that will be it.
Is that on the agenda?
No.
For some reason, I thought it was on the website.
I'm gonna promote that one to panelists, so that way we can, go share screen.
Do you mind actually doing front back? I'll just tell you next slide or not. While the clerk is setting that up, I do just want to know, so under finance also, we've got a resolution for budget transfers at the next meeting. Any questions on those? Okay, and then pending this conversation and discussion, the goal is to have our budget introduction at the next meeting. Thank you, Mr. LeConte. Next slide, please. So for the 2025 municipal budget, the theme was responsible decisions, resilient future. This is my third presentation here on the budget, and I like to have a theme for every budget, just to kind of give some context to the situation. The Finance Subcommittee this year, Deputy Mayor Jen Rowland, Committeeman Marty McHugh, both of them amazing. Just really their insight has been tremendous. Both of them with business experience. Their deputy mayor, she's got a finance and accounting background over 2 decades, and she was on the finance committee last year, which was also helpful. And Committeeman McHugh, he operates an independent international business development firm of over 20 years as well. So having their perspective has been very helpful. Our CFO and assistant treasurer, also their input and their assistance in preparing this budget is invaluable. Our CFO has been here for over 2 decades and knows all the ins and outs of the town, and that is tremendously valuable. So I want to thank them both for all their hard work. Next slide, please. So since I started here, I've been realigning the budget process to start earlier and earlier each of those 3 years, with the goal that we finally achieved in year 3, and that's to start the budget process in September. So that way we have a budget process with breathing room, and that meets the state guidelines and deadlines for having the adoption of the budget. The department heads have been really wonderful at adapting and meeting these challenges. So that is what the timeline now looks like, starting with the budget in September, the budget process in September, having department head meetings, reviewing the finances from the previous year, closing the books to really understand what our actual expenses were, what our real revenues are not just what we've expected. And this takes time. By the time you're processing invoices to vendors and receiving even those invoices. We had a number of finance committee meetings in February and March as well. In total, there were probably about 24 meetings that were held. Meetings and calls between staff, the finance committee, the discussions with various elected officials, all the department heads, and our auditors. And then the budget was presented to the finance committee in February, and their input and their scrutiny of the budget resulted in further revisions. Up until noon today, the last 2 weeks have been quality control, making some more changes. Just today, we shaved off another $83,000 where we could, really trying to get that budget as lean as possible in a responsible manner. Our CFO worked with our auditors to get the state versions of the various budget documents prepared and get it ready for introduction at March 25th, so that way we can adopt the budget on April 22nd. Next slide, please. 2025 was a budget year marked by what I would call unavoidable challenges, and I'll talk about those. But the Finance Committee conveyed to me the sentiment that they have the confidence in residents and taxpayers of our community to really understand when we're going through tough times, and that tough times may call for tough choices. They believe that the taxpayers deserve honest, open, transparent dialogue about the realities of municipal budgeting. And like everyone at home is experiencing rising costs, the costs to operate government are also rising. And nothing will change that fact, and that taxes, for municipal government, taxes are the primary source of revenue to operate. So any maneuvers to minimize the levy this year will really only just be shell games that either defer that responsibility or have the same impact. And those are things that we wanted to avoid. We wanted to avoid the pitfalls and quick fixes like having a downward trend of our fund balance. Every decision in the budget affects the fund balance at the end of the day, and we are keeping within the adopted fund balance of the township, and we want to stay firm in adhering to that policy. That ensures the stability and the security in case of an emergency, and it also ensures that our borrowing is at the most affordable rates it possibly could be. We wanted to avoid increasing borrowing where it's not necessary, just to offset expenses that can be absorbed by the annual budget. That trend will also only make it more difficult to rein in spending, and it just kicks the can down the road to future taxpayers and burdens future elected officials. We want to have conservative revenue projections, not overestimate and or get too close to previous numbers if there's a risk that we're not going to realize those revenues. Things like like interest rates or developer fees. And we want to appropriate only as much as is actually needed. Next slide, please. So the challenges in this budget-themed responsible decisions resilient future is fulfilling our end of the bargain when it comes to union contracts. These are the backbone of the township, and they ensure the safety and security of our township, our DPW and our police department. In addition to annual contractual increases, this year we had a nearly $32,000 additional expense for retention of those employees. At least $100,000 in additional costs in this budget year and each budget year is predicted for the next 10 years with regards to affordable housing obligations and fourth round anticipated costs. Costs like Medicare and healthcare, each of those, that's 14% and 16% increases this year. The utility costs, everyone's either seen the headlines or noticed that electric costs are going up 20% in New Jersey. It's something that's happening nationwide, but definitely in New Jersey. Fortunately, we were forward-looking last year. We went out to auction to purchase our electricity through other suppliers, and we locked in rates, but we still had an increase. Not as bad as 20%, but we still had an increase, and at least this process helps us have stability for future budgeting years. Revenue is decreasing. Development is decreasing in Chatham, like in many other places after a boom from the pandemic, but that affects our developer fee revenue for affordable housing. It affects the assessments. It affects permits and fees as well. Outliers this year, we had a $140,000 expense as an outlier for legal settlement. We're burdened with paying the legal fees for the plaintiff after defending the township at the Supreme Court for really following the directives and the guidelines of the State Attorney General and the Morris County Prosecutor's Office. We did what we had to do. We upheld the law as we understood it and as we were directed to, and unfortunately we lost at the Supreme Court, and that $140,000 has a huge impact on this year's budget. But I do want to emphasize we've not added new staff, so while the workload is increasing with plenty of more burdens on the staff, we have not added new staff. We've completed our transition to the cloud, which has reduced our reliance on in-house hardware for maintenance and upkeep costs. We launched our newsletter with an inaugural bulletin sent out this month, and we're providing more services online with the first set of services for online payments starting April 1st. So we're trying to do more with less. From a capital planning perspective, appropriations for our capital improvement fund this year are at $575,000. That's an investment into the future. A bulk of that will be road work, as we discussed earlier today. 6 roads will be paved, and that is to ensure that every year we have a maintenance cycle so the town doesn't fall into a rut of not paving roads and having to play catch up. 2025's capital budget, and that'll be in a discussion and as we go into capital discussion after we adopt the operating budget. But you'll see that that is focused on the essentials: public safety, roads, vehicles and apparatuses and equipment for the big ticket but actually needed items to allow our public safety and our public works crews to do their jobs effectively. Next slide, please. I always like to include the slide in every budget presentation. The numbers change ever so slightly from year to year, but it's important to note here that while we collect the taxes from the residents and the commercial properties, only about 17% of that, of every dollar that's paid, is used to actually fund our services. The rest of that 83 cents, we write a check to the county, to the schools, and to the library. And so the only thing that's within our control is that 17% for the municipality and for open space. And I think it's important to remember for the public that, you know, as a municipal entity, we're not a profit-driven corporation. We're not selling goods, we're not selling services, we're providing services that are essential. And yes, we try to generate revenue but within the constraints of the law and without growing our operations unnecessarily. Therefore, the primary source of our revenue to operate is going to be taxes. There's no other way about it. And those taxes directly support the services we provide for the community. So every dollar that we receive is accounted for the services that the taxpayers are receiving. There's a direct correlation there. And I think we've been doing a great job, thanks to the hard work of all of our employees, of striking a balance and providing those essential services as efficiently as possible while only levying taxes to pay for those services. Next slide, please. Another thing I'd like to, give an overview on for those from the public who aren't familiar of what municipal budgeting looks like. On the one column, we've got our appropriations, and on the other side is our revenues. Those are the major categories of our operations, and to the right are the major categories of our revenues. The difference between those two is what we have to raise in taxes, and that's what you'll see below. That's what's called the levy. You'll see that later. That's the difference between those two. So as appropriations go up, and we try to hold the line on spending and not have it go up much, and revenues, we certainly like to improve as much as we can our revenues coming in from grants, and we did lock in great interest rates with our bank through negotiating. Whatever that gap is between the two, that's the levy. And unfortunately, also economic times, people are hearing what's happening to interest rates. We've been seeing our interest rates cut, so even though we negotiated great rates, they're now getting cut again, so we have to adjust our revenue projections. Next slide. Just to give a snapshot of what 17 cents of every dollar paid pays for, all these things. A lot goes on, not just all those that we pay for, but also the subsidies we provide to tremendous resources in town, our volunteer fire departments, our volunteer EMS, and our senior citizen center. And they provide excellent services for the subsidies that we provide them. Next slide. These are the top 6, I call these movers and shakers, the notable expenses. What is that? The biggest item in the 2025 budget, and you'll see there's an almost $380,000 increase to this year, is emergency response and public safety. That is police, dispatch, fire hydrants, fire departments, maintenance, the contributions to EMS, everything related to public safety that you can think of is part of this figure here. The other large chunk of change is the almost $2.9 million on insurance, health and liability insurance. Public Works comes in third at almost 2.5. Pensions and Social Security costs, 1.6. And those, what you'll see, that's a great thing that it went down this year, but it'll start to level off. That's because as people retire, and unfortunately some people become deceased, our pension actuarials catch up, and that's almost a 2-year lag. This year is at 1.6 million, 1.5, nearly 1.5 in debt payments on principal and interest for old bonds and vans and other debt that's been issued, and our capital improvement fund is the 6th biggest item here, and that is money that we allocate to go to capital projects without borrowing and or the down payments to borrow. This year we are expecting about $2 million in capital projects, but as I mentioned, this also includes roads, and the rest of it will be apparatuses for our fire departments and vehicles for PD and DPW. So the subtotal of just these 6 items is almost $13 million. And when you look at that out of our total budget, our total appropriations, $19 million, just those 6 items make up almost 70% of the budget. There's a reason that there's an asterisk next to our total appropriations of 19.1, and that's because we are baking into the budget a $1 million grant that we've received from the state in previous years. with grants, they have to be booked as appropriation and revenue. You can't spend the money unless you've noted it as an appropriation, but you also offset that with a revenue on the revenue side. So that's why it looks like such a large jump, because there is that $1 million grant in this year's budget. The more important thing is, as we look at the levy, that's, as I said, the gap between the appropriations and the revenue, that's the levy, and that will give you more of a realistic idea of some increases. So the remainder, out of these 6 items, nearly $5.9 million is paying for everything else. Next slide. So this is what I was referring to here, right? Our appropriations this year are at about $19.1 million. Our revenue's at 7.3. Revenue went up over last year. Again, we've incorporated that $1 million grant, which affects the revenue number. So the amount that we're raising by taxes, that we have to raise by taxes this year, is $11.8 million. You'll see our net valuation taxable, which is what's known as the tax base, our ratables. That's really the lowest increase in many years. Last year was a 2.3% increase. The year before that was a 1.65 increase. It's been over 1% of an increase in the tax base for several years. This year it's only 0.9%. So one of the lowest it's been in a while, but that deals with, as I mentioned before, the pace of development starting to catch up with reality. Next slide. And as I mentioned, the importance of a fund balance, what people hear is the surplus. Why we did not use more than 3.5. We've been holding the line at about $3.5 million for the last few years using our fund from our fund balance. What you'll see in the 3rd row, net fund balance after budget adoption, that's what we would be left with after we use that 3.5. The figure that you'll see at the top, with the increase, surplus of operations, and let's say 2024, you look at that, 3.45. So that's the 4th row down in the 2024 column, that 3.4 figure. That's how much rolls in to the fund balance. So that's what we're, quote, regenerating. So when you look at that line, that regeneration is not trending in the direction that we want, which is why we're holding the line on how much we use the fund balance. That is a tool that a lot of people easily dip into. They're like, well, we'll use more of the surplus to hold the line on the levy, but that has a domino effect and can adversely affect your future budgets. So we're holding the line at 3.5, and we're confident that that is a safe number with this budget, and it still keeps us within our fund balance policy of being between 10% and 15% of our total expenditures. Next slide. So I would say mission accomplished. We've made some responsible decisions. We are planning for a very resilient future in this regards. There's a nominal increase in the tax levy. We're maintaining services. No services have been cut. The fund balance is still healthy, and we're still making capital improvements that are necessary for the township. Next slide. The next slide, and the reason I keep this as the last slide is because it's the sewer utility, because this does not impact taxes. Because it's the sewer utility, it's self-liquidating, so the revenue has to support the operations. This year's budget for the sewer utility is $3,315,000 as opposed to $3,277,000 from last year. Modest increase of $38,000 over the previous year. Our plant undergoes a very thorough analysis of the real costs that are there. We're not looking to beef up necessarily a huge savings over there unless absolutely necessary for future capital projects. They've held the line on any discretionary spending. Really, the biggest increases and the only increases have come from health insurance costs and the costs that are appropriated for pensions and benefits appropriated to the sewer utility. But they've been dealing with rising costs. The chemicals that they need to process sewage at the plant, and as with anything else, electricity costs, other utility costs. So they do a great job over there. It's just 6 employees, dedicated full-time employees running that utility, keeping Chatham flowing. And they have debt service, annual debt service of about $573,000. and that's to pay for those historical infrastructure improvements. And as I mentioned earlier, that we will likely be calling for a rate study though. The rates here have not changed at the sewer utility in a very long time, but major infrastructure improvements are needed to make sure that that is stable and safe and able to operate without any issues. So we can plan on and expect some major improvements in the near future. And that concludes the budget presentation for 2025. Any questions? Or rather, I'll turn to the deputy mayor and the committeemen if they have any comments or anything they'd like to add.
I would just like to say that, you know, the whole process that is in place to get to this point is very intensive, involves everyone. We are not dictating, you know, costs and things to departments. It's a very collaborative effort. We are incredibly lucky to have, you know, the staff and everyone that works for us for Chatham Township, because, you know, our staff goes above and beyond, you know, when we are really kind of trying to manage expenses on a day-to-day basis. You know, in my day-to-day life, I build budgets, I build forecasts, I prepare financial statements. This is what I do every single day. And this is a fiscally responsible budget. Costs are increasing. That is, you know, that is a given. We've seen it, and we did everything we could to try to sharpen the pencil. But unfortunately, if there are several years where there is no increase in taxes, or, you know, if we're not giving Chatham Township a raise, everyone that works outside of their homes understands the concept of getting a raise at your job, and it helps you cover the increased cost of living. So I really just want to thank everyone that was involved. I think that this is, you know, an incredibly fiscally responsible budget with everything that was discussed tonight, from the sewer treatment plant to the tax reevaluation to Colony Pool to, you know, increased litigation expenses to affordable housing. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's things that we cannot choose to ignore. So I think choosing to ignore those things and kicking the can down the road is, just from what I do on a daily basis, is fiscally irresponsible. So I really just want to, you know, happy to answer any questions, open it up for discussion. But I think, you know, it was a very collaborative, intentional, and really good discussion period every time we met to go through it, either in person, online, or even, you know, over email to finalize things.
I'll just concur with what the deputy mayor had to say. I think she gave actually a very good summary. Thank you, Jen. And also just want to, from my standpoint, also thank all the administrator and the administration and every department that really sharpened their pencils and provided input and reasonable looks at things. So thank you.
So, that's 2 cents per $100 of assessed value increase, which translates on an average house of about $860,000 to about $170 a year, right?
I can tell you just a moment, yeah. But you're good with your numbers, so you've been doing this quite a while too, so
I don't want to mislead anybody. So the only question I have otherwise, because I realize there's been a lot of pressure on the budget, and everybody's been trying to hold the line as best they can. Open space.
yes.
Where is that? We're at 2 cents. Are we keeping it at 2 cents?
I think we're looking to keep it at 2 cents because there are, with Colony Pool, there's a lot of work coming down the line there, and you know, with the Fensky property, there's goals and ideas there, and we want to actually start to work on that. So I think the best thing to do is keep it at the 2 cents, so that way we can carry those plans out without having to borrow.
Okay. And we kept the rut the same?
The rut is the same as last year, correct?
Okay.
And Committeewoman, your question, or rather the figure you came up with, the difference per average household was how much?
I was saying
Yep.
an average household of about $860,000, which I think that was the number, And I said 170 a year, is that a good number?
Yeah, I'll say it's about 171 and $71.76.
Nice back of the
Good.
envelope.
I don't doubt her calculation on that. She's very good at it.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of what other stone we've unturned in the past. Okay, I'm good for now.
I mean, not to dwell on the 171, but you know, that's $10, just over $10 a month.
Yeah.
You know, that's with all the costs that we've got going up. That's all we're asking for. It's an extra $10 a month.
Yeah. Well, I know it's been very difficult to get staff, as you had talked about. So yeah, it's understandable. I had a question, I just lost it.
We got a couple of fortunate breaks on staffing.
Yes.
I'm sure that other question will pop into my mind at some point.
If I may ask a question, and Committee Woman Ewald, if you think of it, just butt me up. So capital commitment's about 2 million total.
Yes.
That's inclusive of a road resurfacing, the truck commitment. You've allocated 575. How much of that is unallocated or uncommitted?
It's pretty much all committed, right? So whatever our capital plan, you know, we do have a capital plan already, but and we will present that as we do every year with the capital process. All of that's committed because whatever is not, rather, we want to use it all so we don't have to borrow, right? So we've got about, let's say, $2 million in capital that's expected for 2025. If it's not being used, if that 575 isn't being used, then we have to borrow. So of the 575, we like to use that, the bulk of that for the roads. So that way we don't have to borrow it for the roads and delay that process. You know, we introduce an ordinance, we have to go stop if we're borrowing. If we're self-funding it, we can move ahead much more nimbly with using those funds. So the rest of it will be for a down payment on whatever it is we're looking to borrow.
So when it comes to road resurfacing, the funds for that work will be drawn from more than one bucket.
They'll be drawn from that bucket, the capital improvement fund. Obviously with your approval, but that's what we've been doing is taking it out of the capital improvement fund.
But we won't need to fund with debt because we have those.
Correct.
Funds are, yeah.
Yes.
So when you said 2 million capital plan, we're not looking to incur debt for 2 million. It's 2 million less the 575.
That'll further discussion with the finance committee. We'll refine that. You know, if we need to move things. I'm just estimating right now. Total for capital projects is about $2 million. How much we're going to borrow, not borrow, TBD. We'll be meeting. I think we're looking at a meeting on either 24th or 25th, and then we'll be going over that next. So that way, in April or May, you'll then have a presentation on the capital as they did last year, and then we can move ahead with an ordinance at that time for what we're borrowing, what we're self-funding.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to say was more of a statement than a comment. I always, I look at surplus because it looks like we have room, but we don't really have room. And especially when you see that trending, decline in terms of what we're using the same amount, but the retained balance is declining. So, and it looks like it's going to continue to decline. So, I'm comfortable. Do we have room? Because in terms of the range, what is it, 10 to 15%?
10 to 15, correct, yeah.
So relative to the 10 to 15%, we have room, but that means we're probably not going to have room next year.
Correct, exactly. And that's the big warning is that, you start going down and all these decisions, right? It's great to have a very lean budget. Some towns, and sometimes you will call for a little fluff here and there. You won't, you'll round up on certain numbers because that all regenerates. What you don't spend regenerates surplus. So the leaner you get, the less room there is for money to then regenerate that surplus that you're not spending. So then you just start looking at, you hope, just to break even if everything is going according to plan, but not everything goes according to plan every year.
Yeah. And then the other piece is the 140,000 is a one-time hit, so presumably.
It's a one-time hit, but then next year, we'll have to start kicking in for the reval. So, pretty much all that 140 will then get eaten up by the cost of the reval portion over 5
Okay.
years. The plus side is you won't see a spike, it'll just be level at that point. So we're not gonna have a huge spike from 140 to 280, and it's gonna stay level at that point, which is a good thing for, the cap calculations and increases, but
Mhm.
that 140 is not gonna go away for another 5 years,
Yeah, okay.
or approximately 140.
And you're anticipating the deposit for the fire apparatus in 26?
Not the
Something.
deposit.
Right, so we're not putting down the money until imminent delivery of the apparatus, correct?
Correct. Any of both the apparatus, we purchased one for Chatham Township and one for Green Village. Those payments are not made until delivery. So probably not until 2027, at the earliest.
Okay.
Yeah. But the money has been set aside for those. The money's been appropriated, authorized, and set aside for those.
Only because it was on the last slide, there was a figure about the sewage, it had like 570,000.
The debt
in
service.
So is there still, there's still money like in debt that's being paid off, and how does that affect what we talked about earlier with the renovations and all that?
Yeah, so there is still debt. There's loans, there's, I believe, and I think one of them is what Mr. Rushkey referenced, is there was a previous iBank loan that was issued, so we're still paying the debt on that, the debt service on that. So what would happen is, again, we would look at, let's say it's $6 million, 20 years, we figure out those calculations with the iBank, obviously we know what that is. So let's just, for the sake of clean numbers, just say 6 million divided by 20, that's what the budget would then go up by every year for the sewer utility. Just, again, simplifying, that's not actually how it works when you calculate interest and amortization schedules and payment schedules and all these things, but that's, let's say that figure, that's what we have to expect about that much for the next 20 years to then add to the sewer utilities budget. So that becomes then a debt service payment that gets added, and so again, when I talked earlier about the rate study, those, okay, is the sewer utility collecting enough revenue to offset those expenses? If our expenses are going up and we're not collecting enough revenue, the rates need to go up. So that's why we really need to, but sometimes you take on debt and all debt starts to fall off, and I don't know exactly, what debt's falling off and when. So again, part of the rate study, you're looking at when debt is coming off, when debt is going out, and as I was explaining to the mayor earlier, before the meeting, they're not just linear payment schedules always either. Some of them have curves to them. So depending on where you are in that payment schedule, those rates might go higher, might go lower. Like you saw in our debt service, I think this year, I believe, there's a slight drop off because of where we are in the payment schedule.
Staying on that, on the WPC, so if you just did or can you do back of the envelope math, assuming, the 6 million commitment, and I understand half of it's virtually zero interest, but still you've got to amortize over 20 years. So if you took that burden or partial debt service burden and amortized burden, I would like some assurance that the WPC will be still financially robust. So I understand it's not a business line, so it's not necessarily profit, but understanding what the unencumbered cash is annually for the WPC, can it comfortably sustain whatever that amortized and debt service burden is for the 6 million? Do you follow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we could figure out, if we have an understanding that's going to be.
Oh yeah, I mean we're just starting
Right
that
side up.
conversation.
Okay.
So yeah.
And I understand that's outside the budget, and the financials there is going to dictate whatever the rates are.
Yep, but we do have.
Ultimately, these are financial obligations to the residents, right?
Yeah, what that overage is, that goes into our fund balance for the WPC at the end of the day. So it's just like we have a fund balance for the township, we have a fund balance for the WPC. The fund balance.
You
right,
didn't mention that on the slide, what is?
I did not mention the fund balance on, I didn't give the numbers for the WPC, but the fund balance as of January 1st for the sewer utility is about 2.5 million.
Those are my questions.
Yeah, well,
Thank you
thank
for
you
your
all
work.
for.
See?
yeah.
Thank you all.
Subcommittee, committee woman.
So unless there are, you know, you can either relay that to me directly or to the finance committee, but if there are no changes, that's the budget that we're looking to introduce on March 25th.
Can we get, so we didn't have
I will
anything.
send, yeah, I'm sorry, I will send all that to you.
Okay.
It was literally down to the wire today making changes, and so I didn't wanna send you, incorrect information, but I will send
Thank
that
you.
today. And that's it, Mayor.
Mr. Shandy, thank you very much. We shall move on to our second hearing of citizens. Mr. LeConte, anyone in the digital world?
There are no hands raised.
Great. I invite anyone in the public to come before the mic.
You sure?
I see no one, so I shall close the second hearing of citizens. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thank you.
We keep you awake, Tom?
So two things.
Right.
Thank you, Alex.
How many
Did
people
I
are
see
signing?
the new DPW?
Debbie,
whatever the
me,
name of that
Marty's wife.
position
I'm something here.
went to
Marty,
most
wait a
of
second.
it.
Uh-oh.
Went to most of it.
I'm being
That's
watched.
resume.